Everything seemed to be happening in slow motion as I witnessed it all. It's strange how the mind perceives what is happening. I staggered back, watching as a blurred figure, the roof, and then my own legs came into view at the same time before I collided with the ground. Landing painfully on my upper back, the excruciating pain was overwhelming, followed by sudden darkness and a sickening crunch. It was like a nightmare. Slowly, I came to my senses. My head was splitting, and my whole body ached. Disoriented and not understanding my surroundings, I lay still for a while before carefully trying to open my eyes. I strained my eyes, but could only make out the bright daylight above me and the pattern of ceiling tiles. I closed my eyes again, feeling an overwhelming pain spreading through my body with every breath. I really wanted to scream, but I resisted, focusing on assessing the situation. Any attempt to move my head only led to a sharp shooting pain in my spine. I tried to look away without turning around, but even that made me uncomfortable. Amid the haze of pain, I heard voices. Is this really what woke me up from unconsciousness? Will he survive, doctor? The first voice asked. Will he wake up soon? This question preoccupied everyone as I showed signs of consciousness and then sank back into unconsciousness. We have to be patient, replied another voice, most likely the doctor. Considering what happened, he was lucky. The MRI results were encouraging. There was no cranial bleeding, but there was some swelling. It's clear that he suffered a concussion. We need to monitor for further swelling of the brain. In addition, his left arm is broken in 2 places, the radius and ulna are damaged. The scene was almost comical. He hit the ladder at shoulder blade level and rolled down. The main weight of the fall fell on his back, resulting in several unpleasant bruises. Fortunately, the raincoat from his suit protected him from scratches, but the landing was still not pleasant. Fortunately, he landed with a tilt to his left side, which saved him from further injuries from the gun he was carrying. It was feared that he might have broken his sacrum or hip, but in the end, he stopped hitting the back of his head, which was scratched and bleeding. Although there were no stitches, we cleaned and bandaged the wound to ensure proper healing. He stopped without taking his feet off the stairs. In fact, he slid down until his head and shoulders touched the bottom. I have no idea how he managed to fall down the stairs. I guess he did most of the journey on his stomach. According to estimates, there were about 8 or 10 steps. I didn't count them, but I'll need this information for the report. Do you know when we can talk to him? There was a short pause before the answer came. Well, the woman is being examined now. She resisted at first, but I noticed blood on her fingers and wanted to collect all the evidence before it disappeared. One more thing, the victim has 3 long furrows on his right forearm. Can you identify the direction in which they were made? Did they go from the hand to the elbow or vice versa? I closed my eyes and concentrated on calming my breathing. The monitor continued to beep at a fast pace, but it no longer accelerated. I heard the curtain pull back and felt someone adjusting the ribbon on my arm. After a bit of digging, I felt relieved. The doctor said to check for bruises from the hand to the elbow, but it doesn't make sense given the direction of his fall, a voice remarked. But if you look at it from the other side, it makes sense, he continued. I need to check with the criminologists, he added. While we're waiting, can I have a cup of coffee and make some phone calls? There's a capsule in the medical center. Sue, could you get the officer some coffee? 2 is better, it looks like his partner is already here. There was the sound of a curtain being drawn. So, what do you have? A new voice asked from behind the curtain. One person passed on to another what the doctor had told them about me. Well, we have a man and a woman, said the second man. Their stories match, but I'm skeptical. This does not match what the witnesses are saying. They were surprised by the coincidence. When the call came, they were only a couple of blocks from home and were going to eat. The officers who arrived on the call barely managed to drive up. I was relieved when the authorities were able to provide assistance to the victim and allowed us to focus on the fresh scene of the incident. Hey, have you watched the video? The girl from the apartment opposite ours was conducting a tour for her parents when the commotion began. They immediately grabbed their phones to capture the shocking sight of a naked man and woman on the landing. The man shouted something obscene while they watched this disturbing scene. Although they couldn't see what was going on below, the nature of the situation was quite obvious. These two had recently entered into an intimate relationship. "Yes, we are lucky that the witnesses saw what happened," said a second voice. One of them dialed 911 to call for help. When the first team arrived, a young neighbor was standing next to the victim, pointing at the man who allegedly pushed him and identifying him. "Don't let him escape," she urged. The man, now dressed, rushed down the stairs while the woman stood at the top in a small robe, crying. Both lied about what happened, missing the fact that a few minutes before, they were naked and in intimate proximity. They claimed they were visiting when the victim suddenly attacked them and then clumsily tripped over her own feet while running away. The two men found the situation funny, but I couldn't help but think about the details of their story. Thoughts were spinning in my head about whether it was possible to correct the truth a little. Is it really so scary to embellish the story a bit? The guy was a jerk anyway. He pushed me down the stairs, risking my life and leaving potentially serious injuries. Going back 3 weeks to the beginning of all this, I couldn't help but wonder. It didn't happen at the very beginning, but when I noticed that something unusual was happening. My wife Judy was taking a shower, and her phone was left on the dressing table. Suddenly, it beeped and the screen lit up. Curious, I looked at the message. "Hello, sweet cheeks," it read before the screen went dark. I entered Judy's password and checked her recent messages. It was a message from her boss, Mark Danvers. "Hi, sweet cheeks. I want some passionate intimacy. How about tomorrow?" Mark was a broker for a real estate franchise where my wife worked as a sales agent. Unfortunately, this was not the first time my wife had received an inappropriate message from him. A month earlier, Judy was sitting on the couch when her phone buzzed with a new message. She didn't know that I came up behind her to bring her a glass of wine. The message read, "You looked great this morning. I want a little bit of your love as soon as we can do it." I was shocked and outraged when I read the message over her shoulder, which almost made me drop the wine. Judy skillfully hushed up the situation. I have a feeling that he was texting his wife again. Her name is Julie, and she's next to mine on his contact list. In the past, he made the mistake of sending me messages meant for her. Her face turned red as she clicked on a few icons. "Hey idiot, Robert just came over when you sent me a message meant for your wife. If you're going to flirt with her via text, make sure you send it to the right person, okay?" She turned on the speakerphone. "Hey dude, I'm really sorry," Mark said. "I'm just trying to revitalize my marriage. I wasn't going to send this message to Judy." Fortunately, she wasn't upset about my mistake. I am grateful to her for her understanding. Judy giggled and assured me that nothing terrible had happened. I noticed that maybe I looked good, but I saved it for my husband, Robert. We laughed before hanging up, and later that night, we laughed again while making love. Until now, this incident has not left my mind. Thinking about Mark's message to his wife about tomorrow, I wondered where she was tonight. I'm proud to trust, but this situation made me doubt it. I may not be naive, but I was stunned when I found out that my wife was unfaithful. I believed that our bond was strong, but it turned out that I was wrong. Judy and I first met shortly before graduating from college. As students of the business faculty, we crossed paths in class, but until that moment, we had never really communicated. I was considered a bit of a nerd, while she was more popular. Despite our differences, we found common ground as soon as we got to know each other better. I didn't lack social skills, as I'd had my share of relationships in the past. In my own group of friends, I didn't quite fit the typical image of a muscular jock. With a tall stature and a weight of about 145 pounds, I did not stand out externally, although my sister and her friends thought I was quite decent. I definitely didn't look like a heartthrob. Of course, they've never seen what's under my pants. I remember using this phrase when my sister Becky teased me for not being a stud in front of her friends. The awkward silence that followed her embarrassment was quickly broken by their laughter. I confidently told them that I had as much in my pants as the big boys they had always admired. We all laughed, but deep down I knew that my statement was true based on what I saw in the gym locker rooms. My confidence was confirmed when I heard Judy say to Becky, "You and your friends are teasing your brother, but he can definitely control himself, and he's fine there." Becky and her friends were speechless and confused. My wife wasn't looking for anything special. We managed to make ends meet even though we weren't rich. Although she was making enough sales to cover her business expenses and have extra money, it wasn't enough to support herself alone. I helped support us by working as a sales representative. After graduating from high school, I decided to continue my education and take up accounting. My ultimate goal was to get a CPA and MBA degree and eventually open my own office. However, since I combined full-time work with study, progress was slow. I dedicated myself to working tirelessly to achieve my goals. This often included weekly trips out of town to service my company's clients. In the afternoon, I would plan to meet with a client in Nashatox, and in the evening, I would go to Shreveport, where I would stay for the night. The next morning, I had to meet with another client and then return home. This schedule allowed me to spend all weekends with my wife. Realizing the potential problem, I began to look at it more closely. The couple I worked with, Mark and his wife, were more than 10 years older than us. They were in their 40s, had twin boys who were graduating from high school, and a third child who was in their first year of college. On the other hand, my wife Judy and I had just started discussing the idea of starting a family, and I must admit, I really wanted to have children of my own. After 5 years of living together, 4 of which we were married, I was finally ready. We discussed the possibility of her stopping taking the pills and trying to conceive a child together. It dawned on me that she might have already stopped taking them, but suddenly I realized that I no longer wanted to have a child with Judy. I was looking forward to a passionate night of intimacy, so now she was in the shower preparing for it. I was determined that I would not touch her today or ever again. I am not one of those who indulge in a last fling with a cheating partner. Instead, I retired to the spare room where the computer was and started looking for information. When she came in a few minutes later, she looked and smelled tempting, putting on a little perfume. Her undergarments left no room for imagination, revealing her attractiveness. Despite the desire that arose, I resisted the urge to give in to my emotions. I hesitated whether to make one last intimate contact with her, but then I remembered the betrayal. I apologized, explaining that I was not in the right state of mind. Although some part of me still wanted her, in the end, I decided not to give in. "I don't feel very well, my stomach is bothering me," I lied. She looked at me in surprise, but before she could reply, I quickly got up and hurried past her into the bathroom, pretending to be in a hurry. When she called from the other room and said she was going to bed and asked if I needed anything, I replied that I just needed some time and would join her later as soon as I felt more like myself. I've heard stories about how people use spyware apps on their significant others' phones to keep an eye on them. At the time, I thought it was nonsense. I used to think that only hackers could remotely control a computer, but I soon realized that everything was much simpler than I thought. While some may find it unacceptable to spy on a partner, child surveillance is considered perfectly acceptable. This is exactly how these apps are advertised, to protect children from potential dangers and monitor their actions. I was surprised at how easy it was to do this. I despise dishonesty, but I decided that I would be telling a lot of lies in the coming weeks. Some of the lies would be intentional, and some would be missed, but cheating is a serious betrayal, so I decided to abandon the insidious plan. I admitted that my fake stomach problems were not just a temporary ailment. Using this as an excuse, I got out of bed several times during the night to spend time in the bathroom at the end of the hallway. During one of these trips, I took Judy's mobile phone with me to secretly install a spy app and access her text messages. This was my first experience of such despicable behavior. Since Judy sleeps very soundly, I hoped she wouldn't notice me getting out of bed several times a night. Watching her phone, I discovered that Mark, despite being a successful sales specialist, was also not averse to flirting. Since real estate agents were constantly coming and going from the office, they managed to sneak away together without anyone noticing. Such meetings took place at least several times a week. They often called each other on the phone and exchanged flirtatious messages. From time to time, I suspected that most of these calls were more flirtatious than business-related. I was lucky that I came across a text message. The phone conversations were even more explicit. I made sure to keep multiple copies of one particular conversation because it contained a lot of detailed information about their relationship. I didn't need this for my divorce from Judy, which I plan to initiate in the near future, but I needed concrete evidence of her infidelity. "Let's meet at your place this Thursday when your idiot is out of town," Mark suggested. I can't wait to make love to you on the back of your couch. Stop calling Robert an idiot. I've already told you, Judy expressed her disapproval. It's disrespectful. Mark chuckled. I've already said that Robert is the same size as you, if not a little bigger. You're just too rude for me. I like the intensity, so I keep coming back to you. Robert, on the other hand, prefers a softer approach, but sometimes I crave rudeness. You make me squeal with your efforts. Mark just laughed in response. Julie used to enjoy it with me too, but she said I could get too wild. She prefers to control the pace. Your husband seems to have a hard time satisfying your desires in the bedroom. I like your energetic and passionate approach, although I crave it only a few times a week. Making love is wonderful, and I shouldn't have any complaints. Robert tries to keep up but stops when things get too intense. On the contrary, you continue until you are satisfied, leaving me a little sickly but satisfied. I adore Robert and our intimate moments, but sometimes I miss those wild and intense encounters. Robert keeps a good balance, Judy firmly stated. If you keep insulting him, you won't get any action from me this week. If you want to make love to me, you'll have to ask your wife to do it, and you'd better use contraception. I don't want any accidents. Robert and I want a baby. Mark grumbled, I really don't like using them. Judy replied, it's either that or nothing at all. I don't want any surprises. Did you see the look on Robert's face? Mark giggled. No, but I can't take any chances, Judy replied. Mark continued to laugh. All children are similar to each other. I had 3, and all of them were ugly at first. And if his name is entered on the birth certificate, he'll be stuck. It would be funny if you raised my child. Judy disagreed. No, it's not funny. Kids are cute, and don't forget that you will have a year to challenge it. And you can bet that if he divorces me, you'll be the father. I would sue you for alimony. Are you willing to take that risk? Forget about it. Maybe I should think about a vasectomy, Mark suggested. Julie definitely doesn't want any more children, and I don't want to give up our wonderful intimate life. You're taking a risk regardless of whether Mark decides to have a vasectomy or not, I thought. He can still stay with a wandering woman. This conversation may not be acceptable in court because of the recording without consent. It could even lead to trouble for me because of the potential violation of civil rights. But I didn't care. I was determined to find irrefutable evidence that Judy was cheating. I understood that she would most likely try to distort the situation to make me look like a villain in front of our friends and relatives. She denied my suspicions, claiming that it was all my imagination or that it had only happened a couple of times. She accused me of being unreasonable and unwilling to forgive a minor mistake. But I knew better. The truth was obvious to me, and she was slowly destroying my love for her. As soon as I had concrete evidence, I decided to break off my relationship with her. I started by taking on our financial obligations, paying off all debts. I had taken out significant college loans, while Judy's were quite small. Despite this, I set myself the task of paying off mine first. We had always been careful about credit card debt and had already paid off the cars. In addition, we started saving for a house, as the mortgage was not much more than our current rent. I also started saving money on the side, realizing that I couldn't save too much due to our limited funds, but it was still nice to outsmart the situation. After doing research, I found out that I would have to pay alimony for several years since my wife did not earn enough money from selling houses. I wanted to find a way to reduce this financial burden. I thought about paying the full amount up front to minimize our cash flow. I did everything possible to reduce our cash reserves. I even set up a direct deposit from my salary. Although I knew that I would still have to give Judy her share, I was determined not to let her ask for more money. I had already hired a lawyer to handle the legal paperwork, and as soon as Judy received the summons, I knew there would be problems. Let's go back to that fateful day when my story began. I wasn't supposed to be in town, so the previous week, I asked a colleague to take care of those accounts, and I took care of my personal affairs. During the downtime, I thought about various scenarios. At first, I thought about how I would come home unannounced and find them in bed together, hoping that they would be surprised and shocked. I imagined forcing a naked Mark to come out at gunpoint, perhaps without even letting him take his clothes. I was debating whether to throw the car keys to him as soon as he was in the parking lot or take a more radical approach, such as physically harming him. However, I knew that if I resorted to cruelty, I would end up in prison, as this would clearly be regarded as a deliberate attack. Despite the fact that all my friends knew that I had a permit to carry a weapon and often carried a pistol with me when I traveled, I realized that getting into a physical altercation with Mark was not an option for me. With my height and weight, I wasn't ready to fight him. Having gained weight since college, Mark is tall and big. He often bragged about maintaining his college football weight. The idea of standing up and fighting like a man seemed like nonsense to me. David, for example, was wise enough not to engage Goliath in a traditional battle. Instead, he used his slingshot to defeat the giant. Although some may consider this unethical or fraudulent, the Bible does not condemn his tactics. I watched in awe as God led David to victory. If only I had the same wisdom as him. All my carefully thought out plans and fantasies disappeared when I turned the key in the door of my apartment. I knew they were inside. Mark's car was parked next to Judy's car. In the future, I will deny that I recognized him. I quietly entered the apartment, trying not to make any noise when I put away the keys. It wouldn't have mattered anyway since both cheaters were too busy with their own business to notice anything. Betrayal burned as I listened to their screams and pleas for more. Judy's words hit me with the force of a sledgehammer. In an instant, all my plans were completely forgotten. She was leaning over the back of the sofa, as described in the phone conversation that I recorded. He stood behind her, engaged in intense intimacy with her. I briefly thought about hitting him from behind, but his legs were too close together. When Mark was on the verge of a peak, I reacted quickly and hit him in the side, causing him to fall off Judy. "You bastard," he shouted, realizing what had just happened. I didn't hit him that hard or that far, just enough to send him flying away from Judy. Despite his size, he moved quickly and grabbed the front of my suit. I tried to hit him to free myself and get the gun, but the tightness of the coat prevented my movements. It wasn't like in the movies. Once he grabbed me, it was impossible to escape. He shook me violently, like a pit bull grabbing prey. His arms were much longer than mine, which is why my punches missed the target. Desperate, I resorted to kicking, and I managed to get between his legs, but it wasn't enough to make him loosen his grip. He continued to hold on tightly. At that moment, Judy turned around and saw that I was going to get my gun. She quickly grabbed my right arm to prevent me from reaching it, resulting in the sleeve of my coat being pulled up to the elbow and leaving 3 deep scratches from her nails on my forearm. I struggled to free myself from her grip when I realized that I had left the door open when I entered the house. Suddenly, Mark picked me up from the ground and forcefully pushed me out of the living room through the door. When he released me, I found myself suspended in the air above the stairs. My thoughts were interrupted by voices, and I heard the police discussing the information they had gathered. I quickly devised a plan, praying that it would be more successful than my unsuccessful attempt to scare off my wife's naked lover with a gun. I groaned loudly to warn the hospital staff that I had woken up. The doctor quickly entered the room to assess my condition and asked me to move my fingers and toes to make sure that I was almost unharmed. He advised me to avoid unnecessary movements, which was obvious considering how painful it was to blink. Shortly after that, the police arrived and asked if I was ready to share my story about what happened. I retold about the same version of events that was described earlier. I found out that my wife was having an affair with her boss and decided to divorce her. I never imagined that I would find them in the middle of an affair in our own apartment. I admitted my mistake by letting Mark come between us, but the situation took a violent turn when Mark threatened to kill me, calling me names. At the same time, Judy intervened, reminding him that I was armed and not letting me answer. I couldn't hold him for long. It was clear that something needed to be done urgently. Before I knew it, they were already rushing through the living room to the exit. I couldn't tell when Judy let go of me, but I lost my balance and couldn't reach the gun. Suddenly, I flew backward through the air and heard a loud crunch when I landed. It looked like he threw me down the stairs. That's the last thing I remember. I hope the doctor was right and I wasn't paralyzed. Did I feel guilty for lying, for embellishing the part where he threatened to kill me? Judy didn't tell him to act fast. None of them deserved my sympathy. I prayed that there would be no evidence to refute my version of events. I couldn't help but wonder if they had recorded their lovemaking. It would be a disaster. Surprisingly, the examination confirmed my version. Mark claimed that I attacked him and he was just defending himself. He came to visit Judy, one of his agents, who was not feeling well and was worried about her. Perhaps I misunderstood the situation. After he pushed me away and yelled at me, everything got out of control. I was running in a hurry, jumped out the door, and stumbled on the stairs. I hit the railing and tumbled down the stairs. Judy confirmed that Mark pushed me hard to get me to run away. She intervened, preventing me from hitting Mark, which resulted in a scratch on my arm. As a result of this incident, investigators discovered that my suit trousers were stained with Mark's semen, indicating their proximity. In addition, not only his semen was found on the right leg, but also my wife's discharge, which indicates that during the confrontation I kicked him while standing face to face with him and not running away. Initially, Mark was not charged with a serious crime, only with assault. He was able to post bail, but he did not have the full amount and had to resort to the services of a guarantor, which cost him $5,000. I couldn't help but wonder if he was worth the trouble. I wouldn't find out about all this for some time because even my brothers decided to hide information from me until the doctors confirmed that I was safe. They wanted me to stay calm. After I gave my statement to the police, I had a sudden attack and lost consciousness. I blinked and suddenly found myself in a dimly lit room, with thoughts of talking to a policeman still raging in my head. As I lay there, thoughts of my cheating wife and Mark consumed me. Not only did they betray me, but they also wanted me to disappear. I had already planned how I would confront them if the opportunity presented itself. I even imagined how I would destroy Mark if he crossed my path again, citing self-defense. But deep down, I knew it was just a fantasy, a way to deal with the harsh reality of the situation. I was scared when I saw a female figure in the room, but it was only when Judy came closer that I realized her presence. My heart started racing, and I started screaming for her to leave, accusing her of trying to harm me. My brother quickly entered the room to see what was going on, and Judy was stunned, tears streaming down her face as she denied any wrongdoing. Despite her protests, I accused her of contributing to the previous incident when I was injured, and she was escorted out of the room. She was still crying and protesting her innocence. I was insensitive. Deep down, I really wanted to talk to her. I was interested to hear her explain her desire for rudeness in bed. Instead of trusting me, she was looking for it elsewhere. Although I would be willing to engage in rough role-playing sometimes, I would never be able to support her infidelity. Because of the concussion, the doctors watched me closely in the hospital for a week to prevent brain swelling. Fortunately, my two brothers often visited me and even stayed with me in the ward during the first days. They could hardly believe the shocking news about Judy that I shared. In the end, I quietly confessed to John that I might have exaggerated her involvement in the attempted crime. I assured him that I could always retract my words later, but for now, I wanted her to take responsibility for her actions. She deceived and betrayed me, destroying our marriage and my trust. "Please give this message to Dave," I said. "I hesitate to speak openly for fear that I will be recorded." John found it funny. After leaving the hospital, I revealed to him the details of how I had secretly taped Judy's phone. "I'll let her know that I'm offended and angry, but I need time to gather my strength before I can talk to her." It was almost funny to think of giving the witch a glimmer of hope, as she had once given me false hope for a happy future. Despite my anger, my love for her only increased the pain of the situation. One of the few visitors I allowed in was Julie, Mark's wife, who came to me immediately after she found out that I had woken up the day after the incident. She knew some of the details of what had happened but was puzzled as to why Mark had been arrested for my assault. Mark wasn't honest with her, telling the same story he told the police, that he was visiting one of his agents when her husband unexpectedly returned home. Thinking the worst, I misinterpreted the situation and a scuffle ensued, as a result of which I fell down the stairs. Mark protested his innocence, claiming that he was falsely accused of pushing me. His explanation seemed absurd to me. He clearly did not know that the video was being recorded nor about the possibility of forensic evidence. I asked if this man was delusional or just optimistic that the neighbors would not be questioned. I informed her that when I entered the room, they were engaged in intimate activities. Mark assumed that I would accuse him of having an affair with my spouse. She insisted that it was all innocent, but I remained skeptical. Actually, I want to know if you have any evidence. Remember, we have a prenuptial agreement. I am entitled to 70% of the total property if infidelity is proven, so don't forget to set aside some for me. I intended to bring a lawsuit against him regarding the remaining assets after the criminal trial. I advised her to go to a lawyer and start divorce proceedings to secure her part of the assets and not allow him to use them for his defense. In addition, I have an audio recording of their conversation about their affair, as well as copies of incriminating texts. There's also a video recording of Mark and my wife in a compromising position on the landing of my apartment shortly after he attacked me. In the footage, they are both naked. Besides this evidence, I am ready to give my testimony. If this evidence turns out to be insufficient, I may have more on the clothes I was wearing at the time. I told her it was hard to believe that I could have been involved in a scuffle with a naked man who had just left his marks on me. "Do you have all this evidence?" she asked, clearly shocked. I nodded. I explained that I knew Mark liked roughness in bed, and this immediately convinced her that I was telling the truth. "I will see my lawyer as soon as I get out of here," she said. "Please help me collect the rest of the evidence as quickly as possible." I assured her that I would help in any way I could. Mark and Judy didn't seem to notice the overwhelming evidence against them. Despite this, they continued to stick to their fabricated story, trying to blame me for being hurt and claiming that I misjudged the situation and overreacted. I suspected that Mark was currently trying to eliminate the consequences. He may have hidden the money, but I've heard that it can be retrieved. I hoped that all the funds he transferred to the guarantor would be deducted from his share, not mine. Before she left, Judy hugged me and wished me well. I had crossed paths with Judy at Mark's agents' parties during holidays like Christmas, and she was always kind. None of us deserved the chaos that was about to descend on us. The day after I was discharged from the hospital, I found myself at my family's fishing camp, planning to take as many sick days as possible and then burn all my vacation pay. Fortunately, my boss was sympathetic to the situation and explored the possibility of working remotely for several hours a day while I was recovering, all while receiving my usual salary. After considering my actions, I realized that I had embellished their deception with my lies, turning it into a criminal offense. But on further reflection, I remembered the case when I fell down the stairs. I stumbled not because of my own clumsiness, but because I was forcefully pushed. Maybe Mark just wanted to get me out of the way so as not to interfere with his dressing, but at that moment, I was overcome with anger and ready to strike back. In the midst of this chaos, I remained focused and productive, taking drastic actions such as canceling our credit card and ensuring that Judy received her share of the amount. Despite paying off our debts, the amount remaining for her was minimal. I didn't dare reveal my secret too soon, so I took my time. But now it's time to put an end to it, although I might have to pay for it later. At the moment, I was determined to make Judy's life as uncomfortable as possible. I took over the rent and utilities but wasn't going to financially support Judy in buying food or gasoline for her car, only on the instructions of the court. Julie, Mark's wife, acted quickly. Despite my initial fears that Mark might try to hide the property, he seemed to think his lies were enough and he had nothing to worry about. I was a jealous husband who let his imagination get out of control. She took 70% of our cash and froze our investment accounts, leaving me with questions that needed answers. I contacted Judy, informing her of my whereabouts. Despite her numerous attempts to contact my brothers while I was in the hospital, begging for an appointment, I finally agreed that she could come the same day. I made it clear that she had to come alone. If she dared to bring Mark with her to try and convince me to drop the charges, I warned her that I would not hesitate to use force. I was afraid he would come after me. When I spoke, I wanted them to write down my words. I wanted it to be recorded that I was not ready to risk another attack. Our meeting was emotional. I must admit losing this woman was painful. She was very dear to me, although not as much as before. I believed that she loved me, but not enough to be faithful. She crossed the line between loyalty and betrayal. "I'm grateful that you let me meet you so we could talk," she said as she parked. "You know that I didn't help Mark in his attempt to physically harm you." I shrugged my shoulders dispassionately and invited her inside. Pretending to be weak, I asked her to bring drinks, and I sat down at the table. While she was getting to know my house, I set up a video recording focusing on the chair where she was supposed to sit. I waited patiently for her to join me in the living room, a small room that served as a common area next to the kitchen. I couldn't help but wonder if you were trying to catch me talking on camera. I broached the subject. She quickly denied such intentions, pointing out as proof of her innocence that her mobile phone was in her purse. Without hesitation, she surprised me by completely undressing. Smiling mischievously, she offered to let me search her to make sure she didn't have any hidden bugs. Her playful demeanor hinted at a vicious game she wanted to play, despite her connection to her boss. I suggested that she get dressed while we chatted, but she firmly stated that she would remain undressed. She joked that she had left a snail trail on the chair and teased me to check if there was a hidden dictaphone. With a mischievous grin on her face, she playfully invited me to grope her. It was clear that she was not being sarcastic but sincerely wanted to make a joke. She knew about her attractiveness and how it affected me. I knew she was kidding me. She had an ulterior motive. "Where should we start?" "What is it?" she asked. "Let's start with the reason for all this, not from why you decided to betray me, but why you were ready to help this evil man in my death," I snapped, trying to keep my composure. I took a deep breath. "I wasn't trying to help him," Judy replied with tears in her eyes. "I was just trying to save myself. I didn't know he would do that. I just wanted to stop you from using a weapon. Even when he made you come out, I thought he would just close the door and we could solve the problem." After he pushed me down the stairs, I finished her sentence. She nodded. "I was terrified," she confessed. "You didn't even bother to check on me. When the police arrived, they informed me that Cheryl from next door was kneeling next to me, and you were on the landing in a bathrobe and crying," I explained. "After you went into the house, the jerk got dressed, and you put on a bathrobe. I assumed that you quickly came up with a story about how I came home and found you in a bathrobe with your boss, who came to check on you because you were sick." Not understanding the situation, I attacked him. He defended himself, and when he approached me, I panicked and ran away, eventually tripping and falling down the stairs. It was just an unfortunate accident. Judy denied mentioning that I had caught them making love. She clarified that she did not describe it that way. After a pause, she asked me how I knew about it. I explained that I had been questioned by the police, and 2 people had told conflicting stories. Because of the head injury, they wanted to make sure I didn't misunderstand the situation. I noticed that Mark was only charged with assault, not attempted murder, and that got me thinking. I questioned Judy about why she lied to protect him and help him avoid the consequences. She admitted that she did it out of fear. "I'm sorry that I didn't know if you were alive. Mark mentioned that if you got a head injury and survived, you might not remember what happened. When we heard the sirens, I didn't have time to change my clothes. I grabbed a robe, and we quickly came up with a story. Mark hoped that he would be able to avoid guilt if he succeeded. I was planning to say that you and I were arguing and you accidentally fell, but there were a lot of inconsistencies in our fictional story. I didn't even mention Cheryl from next door, but her parents at least saw her and Mark standing naked on the landing, if not the attack itself. Were you willing to go to such lengths to protect him?" I asked, shocked. She nodded. "He promised to fix everything, but if the truth comes out, he'll lose everything, and we'll both end up in jail. He's for pushing you down the stairs, and I'm for helping you hide it." Judy began to cry. "If you were alive, your word would be against ours that we were doing something wrong. We had to continue the deception even after we found out that you had come to your senses. Mark insisted that you might suffer from amnesia, but you remember everything, don't you? Every little thing. You were talking about Mark's financial losses due to the prenuptial agreement with his wife. I have already informed her of what I witnessed, but she needs proof to enforce the marriage contract. Your testimony alone is not enough." Judy informed me that Mark had offered to compensate me if I changed my story. He promised to give us $50,000, $25,000 each. This money can be spent on consultations so that we can work on being together again. I was taken aback by such an unexpected offer and must have looked incredulous. "Do you really think I'm going to cover for him? Besides, there was no way he could find so much money without his wife finding out. She's probably keeping a close eye on their finances. He must have stashed the money in a secret account for many years. He secretly kept money in an offshore account at the Royal Bank in Grand Cayman, using the name and social security number of his eldest son. He deposited funds into this account, which he called his retirement savings. He promised to share some of this money with us. All you have to do is change your point of view. Please, Robert, we can rebuild everything and secure a comfortable future for ourselves. Mark was just an affair, but you're my priority. I want to have a family with you, she begged. I couldn't help but grin. I can't believe all these inconsistencies in your made-up story, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. It was clear that in order to agree to this, I would have to distort the truth. Judy suggested that I could refer to confusion and the fact that Mark just aggressively approached me, causing me to panic. But I doubted that he would compensate us for the damage if I changed my testimony. Do you really believe that he will reward us in some way after I review this information? I asked. The thought that he would use me again, first as a cuckold and now as a gullible fool who had changed the truth, haunted me. It was obvious that he would find entertainment in this situation, knowing that they would never believe me if I tried to change my story in the future. Why on earth would he admit to you that he's been secretly saving money for years? He's not that stupid, I said. He knows you're easy to fool and he probably hopes that I am too. If that were true, he would have kept it a secret, not even telling his own mother. Judy's expression changed as understanding dawned on her. She shook her head. I'm sure we can trust him, she insisted. I repeated that before considering such an application, I needed to see concrete evidence such as a bank transfer with the correct route and account numbers, as well as the name of the bank to confirm the existence of the account. I can consider letting him go for $100,000, but first, let's discuss something else. Why did you even let this man into your underpants? What did I do to deserve this? Am I not man enough for you anymore? She started to cry a little. How long have you known about this? When did you find out? I shook my head silently. You didn't do anything wrong. Our marriage was wonderful. We had an active sex life at least 3 times a week until you got that stomach infection and stopped. Oh no, I must be so stupid. That's when you found out, wasn't it? She looked at me with tears in her eyes and continued. She was sitting with her legs open, not caring about looking decent. Now she was embarrassed and quickly reached for her panties and shirt. Breaking the silence, I asked, when did it start? About 3 months ago. At first, we didn't have intimacy even once a week. I'm not even sure why I decided to start. We didn't have any problems. Mark was flirting as he usually did with everyone. He was flirting with you, but he called it just being friendly and making a connection. I can't say exactly when it turned into an intimate relationship, but a lot of what Mark was saying had a subtext. I think it all started when he mentioned his dissatisfaction with his intimate life at home. He hinted that he needed to talk to someone, and I stupidly obeyed. Looking back, I realized that it was a setup, although I'm not sure that's exactly what Mark intended. Now that I think about it, I can't help but wonder if he's done this with other girls before me. But then, I was just fascinated by his words. He confessed to me that his wife prefers to make love rather than the rough intimacy they used to have. He longs for the intense animal encounters they shared in the early days of their relationship. His words ignited a fire in me, and that night I couldn't resist. I attacked you without hesitation, with impatience and readiness for action. But I didn't reveal the whole truth. All I said was that I wanted you to make love to me. I've been thinking about that night a lot lately. Just thinking about it makes me ecstatic, Judy admitted, pausing to assess my reaction. Despite the strong desire to take the bait, I remained sitting, holding back. Judy took a few deep breaths before continuing. I wanted to feel this incredible experience again, she admitted. That weekend, we were so passionate about our intimacy, constantly indulging in passionate lovemaking. I clearly remember that weekend. It was really unforgettable. My wife and I were very close, spending time in passionate lovemaking, after which we rested and ate, and then got down to business again. I had a conversation with Mark the following week. At first, I didn't mention our intense intimate relationships. Instead, he revealed that he had one intense session with Julie after which she preferred more sensual lovemaking. Feeling excited, I broke my promise and talked about our intimate relationship. I admitted that we had an amazing time over the weekend. I made love almost every night, but it was nothing compared to the mind-blowing experience we had the previous weekend. Mark assured me that he could give me the same pleasure whenever I wanted. At first, I laughed at his statement, but over time, I wondered if he could really do it. The desire to engage in intense intimacy consumed me. The more I thought about it, the more I longed for him. I couldn't get rid of the memories of the intense weekend we spent together. Despite the fact that Mark and I had exchanged stories, we had not yet crossed physical boundaries. In the end, after Mark's persistent requests, I reluctantly agreed that he would try to satisfy my desires. That was my mistake, Judy admitted quietly. Mark doesn't make love, he does it differently. After the first time we were together, I didn't care what he liked. I didn't kiss him, I didn't do anything else, I just let him give me pleasure. And you liked it, I accused. Judy nodded, tears in her eyes. Yes, it was very strong. I loved you and I still love you. Our physical connection is amazing, but there was something about the way Mark treated me that made me doubt my own reality. It was like I was going into a fantasy world with him. I couldn't participate in such a dynamic with a person who was truly dear to me and who cared about me in return. Who do you love? I asked, remembering the text message she had received from Mark in which he hinted that he wanted to have an intimate relationship with her. She hesitated before answering, and I realized that this was supposed to be a wake-up call for both of us. If you had ended your relationship with him, I might never have found out. I could have been the ignorant fool Mark thought I was, I said. She reacted angrily, expressing her dislike for the word. But you seem to like the idea. You enjoyed betraying me, continuing to do so despite the danger, and you deliberately continued to deceive me until I found out the truth, I continued. She shook her head in denial. Well, I hope you enjoy spending time with him, I said calmly. Please get dressed and leave. Our time together is over. She looked surprised at my sudden decision to send her away. Can't you fight for me? Please, make me yours again, she begged. Just don't push me away. Tears filled her eyes as she pleaded. I sat down, took out her pants, and handed them to her. You have nothing left to return. You traded me for this jerk, I said bluntly. Without saying another word, she put on her trousers, picked up her shoes and purse, and quietly left the room. Standing outside, she hesitated before putting on her shoes, hoping that I would call her back. I'm sorry, I whispered, looking after her. Robert, I'm sorry, she said, getting into the car and driving away. I turned off my cell phone and laptop recordings, taking care to save files to the cloud. Taking a card out of my wallet, I dialed Sergeant Bergeron's number and introduced myself as Robert LeBlanc, the man who was thrown down the stairs last week. I mentioned that I have a video that he might want to watch. While I was copying the video, my phone buzzed, notifying me of a call from Judy. I was busy at the time and didn't pay attention to it. The call was automatically recorded. I'm going home after meeting Robert, Judy said. There's nothing wrong with his memory because he remembered all the details of what happened. She was glad he didn't go with her because she thought I would have reacted violently. She admitted that recording the conversation was not the best idea and was grateful that she did not try to do so. In a desperate attempt to prove that the conversation was not being recorded, I undressed in front of Robert. Surprisingly, he almost didn't get turned on by the sight of me, which clearly indicated his anger. It became obvious that Robert was too cowardly to take revenge despite his unfounded accusations. I confirmed with confidence that we really had an affair. We need to lay low for now. I suspect that my wife may be monitoring my actions. She's looking for evidence to divorce me. Our children are almost grown up, but she can still leave, receiving 70% of our assets, including the business and alimony. Her father insisted on a prenuptial agreement before supporting our business venture. The marriage may come to an end based on what she thinks the future holds for us. I hope for a 50-50 division of the property without alimony. I will have to give up the house, but I will be able to leave the brokerage services. I can still make a living, but if Robert divorces me, I won't have enough money to support myself, Judy admitted. Even with alimony, I just hope he can move on with his life. I'm ready to do anything to keep him, consultations, wearing a chastity belt, a marriage contract. I'm ready for anything. Why forget about him? I will send some sales to your side to help you, but we'll have to keep it a secret so as not to upset the other agents. Just keep refraining from making love to him like you did. But right now, I need to focus on getting things right with Julie before I dive into anything else. My main task is to clear my name of the assault charge. What was this fool thinking when he refused to accept money to change his life? He agrees to a large sum, but only if he checks the details of the transfer first. He's convinced that I'm lying about the bill, and he doubts that you'll be able to make the payment. Judy chimed in, admitting that he might be right about something. It would be foolish for him to retract his initial testimony. I thought about giving him $25 in advance, but only if I record the deal. If he had dared to ask for more money, I would have accused him of blackmail. The idea of paying him $100 was absurd. I could have easily eliminated him for much less. Judy intervened, warning Mark that he would confess to the authorities if he ever mentioned such a scheme again. To ensure her safety, she also planned to record a video confession and hand it over to several trusted people. If Robert gets even a little dizzy, falls off the dock, and drowns, I'll report you immediately. You are not allowed to threaten him anymore, I was just saying. Actually, I would never do anything like that, Mark added. Judy wasn't convinced by his words, so I tried not to let my guard down. I also recorded this conversation as proof. Later, I had an appointment with Burson, who came to the camp as it was located near the city. I started to consider the possibility that Mark might actually have a hidden account, but why would he admit it to anyone? Perhaps he didn't think twice about telling Judy about it, just like the time he mentioned my elimination. Burson seemed impressed by the video of my conversation with Judy. I could tell that he admired her physique, even though he didn't talk about it. He planned to show it to the assistant district attorney in charge of the case. It was an added bonus. We have received the preliminary results of the forensic medical examination. There were stains of biological fluids on your trousers and a mixture of liquids on your right leg. Before the trial, we will need to compare them with DNA, but it seems clear who else it could be. We also examined the sofa and carpet where the alleged intimate activities took place and confirmed the presence of matching stains. There were even several stains near the door, indicating that some liquid could have dripped and spread during the quarrel. The positive aspect of this evidence is that it shows that the altercation started 12 feet from the door. The distance of 3 feet from this place to the top of the stairs adds credibility to your story. We will probably transfer the charges against him to the category of attempted murder. There is a possibility that your wife will also be charged, although it is not known whether the district attorney will consider her an accomplice or an active participant. The fact that your skin and blood were found under her nails indicates that she actually physically grabbed you. Her explanation that she was trying to stop you from getting a gun may be interpreted differently by an experienced lawyer. When I asked about this, I was informed that I have the right to defend myself if I am attacked. An experienced lawyer knows how to manipulate the perception of a situation. For example, although Danvers physically grabbed you, he didn't actually hit you despite his large size and the ability to cause harm. He did not have a weapon at that moment. You couldn't have foreseen that he would throw you down the stairs. His threat of violence is understandable and made you fear for your life, although he denies that he ever made such a statement. Ultimately, the outcome of such cases depends on the jury, but the fact that you didn't physically influence him makes this detail irrelevant. I doubt he would claim that he feared for his life when you had a gun and he pushed you down the stairs in self-defense, but don't be shocked if his lawyer tries such a defense. I have witnessed the insane tactics used to seat out. That evening, my father-in-law called me. He found out about my injury and subsequent discharge from the hospital. He expressed regret that he had not visited me while I was there. He explained that he and his mother-in-law had been on a cruise for the last 10 days and had just returned by regular plane. They are now returning home. We couldn't get through to Judy, but when we turned on the phone, we found 3 messages. The first one said that you fell down the stairs and are in critical condition. In the second one, we were assured that you would be fine. The last message said that you were discharged from the hospital. Are you all right, Bill? I regret to inform you that these reports do not provide a complete picture. I always spoke highly of this man because both he and his wife treated me well. It wasn't a fall down the stairs, but rather a push, almost a throw. Judy's boss tried to hurt me. I found them making love in my living room, and it's sure to lead to chaos." He was shocked by this discovery. I overheard him sharing the news with Sandy, my mother-in-law, who was very upset. I urged him to talk to Judy and listen to her opinion. Unable to stay at home, I interrupted the conversation and immediately took action. The next morning, I wasted no time contacting my lawyer and inquired about the progress of the divorce proceedings. The documents were prepared and ready to be handed over to Judy. All he needed to do was locate her. The server has already searched the real estate office and my apartment, but Judy was not found at either location. Burson informed me that both Mark and Judy were arrested as soon as they arrived at work that morning. He handed over the audio and video files that I had given him the night before to the assistant district attorney, and he worked late to file all the charges. The assistant district attorney asked me to be in his office, and I was curious why. Burson accompanied me during the visit. He wanted to warn me against discussing bribes for changing my story, fearing that this might be interpreted as me being willing to change my testimony for the right price. I assured him that Danvers didn't have enough money to sway me or convince me to compromise my integrity. All I needed was the bank information to give it to Julie Danvers. I informed him that I had already contacted Julie to inform her about the alleged secret account, and she planned to instruct her lawyer to investigate further. This seemed to satisfy him, although he asked me to write a statement confirming it anyway. I advised him that it was better to leave the investigation to others. Avoiding trouble is very important. Audio recordings cannot be used, nor can illegally obtained information be used to advance an investigation by virtue of the law, but there is valuable video evidence that can be used legally because you are involved in it. Mark Danvers was charged with attempted murder, and Judy was charged as an accessory after the fact. Although the district attorney believed that assault charges could not be brought against Judy, he did not want her to completely escape the consequences. The charges against her, without the involvement of the police, could have carried a maximum penalty of a fine of $500 and imprisonment for up to 5 years. It seemed absurd to me that the punishment for such a serious crime could be so minimal. Burson chuckled and commented on the unpredictability of the law. It seemed inevitable that Danvers would face the consequences. The district attorney hinted that he would show leniency to Judy if she agreed to testify against Mark. It was the only form of justice I could hope for. Although I despised her actions, I didn't want Judy to suffer too much. I called my lawyer and informed him of her whereabouts so that he would hand her the letter after her release. My brother John accompanied me to pick up the remaining things from the apartment: clothes, a desktop computer, and several pistols stored in a safe, everything I needed. After looking around the house, I realized that everything else would serve as a painful reminder of Judy and the life we shared, no matter how fleeting it was. As we were finishing packing, Sandy, Judy's mother, arrived in her car and found us packing boxes on the landing. She wrapped me in a big hug. "I can't believe that my daughter is ready to give up everything for just one affair with someone else," she sobbed. "Do you think we have a chance to overcome this?" Before I could answer, she continued, "I'm not suggesting forgiving her, at least not right away, but perhaps with the help of long-term consultations. Just before Bill and I went on a cruise, Judy mentioned that you two were planning to start trying to have a baby. We were very happy about it." Judy's sister, who was 22 years old, took some of Judy's things with her mother. She shook her head in disbelief. "I can't tell you how frustrating this is for me," she admitted. "I have video and audio recordings that show the full depth of the situation. Judy doesn't even know that I have it all. She and her lover think it's just their word against mine." "Do you have any proof?" Sandy asked, taken aback. Judy downplayed the significance of this affair as a minor affair she regretted, but you don't want to forgive her. It wasn't just a short-term affair, it lasted for several months. "What I have is incriminating," I confessed. "Some of them are quite graphic: nudity, obscene expressions. I don't think you should see this." "To hell with it, Robert," Sandy said firmly. "I'm a grown woman. You've always been respectful. You never swore in front of Bill and me. I probably swear more often than you do, and I know what intimacy looks like, so is Bill. I want to see and hear everything you have. I have a feeling that judging by your behavior, the files will show a complete disaster for my daughter. It doesn't look good, does it?" I agreed with a nod. At first, I didn't want Judy to accuse me of being a heartless jerk who couldn't forgive a small mistake, but this plan quickly fell apart. This is not good. I don't want to hurt you, I confessed. I warned you. I need to see the evidence you have, Sandy demanded. Cheating infuriates me, regardless of who committed it, you or Judy. Over the years, I've had many opportunities to betray Bill. Some of the offers, I admit, were tempting, but I have always remained faithful. I promised to provide Bill with an audio recording of Judy's infidelity, as well as other audio files. Judy will need your support, I said. She's going to have a tough legal fight. She nodded in agreement. We will support her, but that doesn't mean we will approve of her actions, Sandy said firmly. I told them I was moving in and offered to let Judy stay, but Sandy insisted that Judy stay with them for the time being. Rachel insisted on helping to pack some of Judy's things. Damn, what a mess, Rachel commented. I nodded in agreement. No, you only know part of it, I continued. I was 17 when you and Judy started dating. I dated a guy from the football team, but we didn't make love, we just dated. Mom talked a lot about how Judy hit the jackpot by finding a guy who would always be there for her, someone like Dad. You may not have been big and handsome, but you looked decent and you were attractive in your own way, someone a girl could rely on for love, smart and loyal. I chuckled. It sounded like you were describing a faithful dog, Rachel grinned and said, Hey, you know what I mean. You and I have become close. I admired my sister, dated guys, and was looking for someone like you, but I've never met anyone like you. Rachel hugged me tightly and confessed, I'll just say it, if my sister is stupid enough to let you go, then I want to get you. I've had feelings for you for a long time. I just want you to know about it. I'm here for you. I was at a loss for how to react. The situation did not bode well for me. I hugged Rachel, expressing my gratitude for her affection. She responded with a passionate kiss that aroused desire in me. It seemed like all the women in Judy's family had a similar effect on me. I suggested to Rachel that Judy didn't have to vacate the apartment since I would be living at my family's fishing camp outside the city, but Rachel disagreed, explaining that her mother was upset about Judy's mistake and wanted to bring her home to look after her. I offered for Judy to stay with me if necessary, but Mom quickly rejected the idea. Rachel, who had just graduated from high school, said her mom didn't want her to be burdened with taking care of Judy. Mom stressed that I needed to focus on building my own life and take responsibility for my decisions. She repeated this advice many times on the way. John undertook to help by taking my things to the car, as the doctor warned me against intensive activity due to the cast. He took on all the heavy worries. I have your phone number, and I know where your fishing camp is. Be ready for my visit, Rachel grinned, leaning closer to me and whispered, I hope you'll be ready for the load soon. Suddenly, a voice interrupted us from behind. It was Cheryl, the woman from across the street. Hey man, I see you're already on your feet, she said, looking at the boxes on the landing. I hope you're not trying to carry them. Remember, you can't lift weights after a concussion, you don't want to make the situation worse. Surprised, I asked, how did you know about my injury and the doctor's orders? I want to express my gratitude to you for the help you gave me during my injury. I found out that you were by my side and assessed my condition. Cheryl adjusted the badge on her overalls and mentioned that she works in the intensive care unit located around the corner from where I was treated. She specializes in cardiac care, not neurology. Greta, the nurse who mostly looked after me, turned out to be Cheryl's former roommate from nursing school. Cheryl made sure to keep an eye on my condition. She jokingly mentioned that the doctor noted only a slight swelling, comparing it to if someone had a small heart attack or was slightly pregnant. Cheryl giggled and then discreetly checked my medical records. As nurses in the department, we often exchange information. You have suffered a serious injury, and it is very important that you calm down. Although they may say that it will take from 7 to 10 days to recover, I advise you to take the minimum period of time. I knew she was a nurse, but I didn't know the details. Judy and I invited her to visit several times, and she shared bits of her personal life with us. She seemed pretty enough to me. I mentioned to her that it was my brother who lifted and loaded all the weights during the move since I had packed only my clothes. I once again expressed my gratitude to her for saving my life. She giggled and admitted that, to be honest, she was scared to death. I am not a neurology specialist, but I have been trained in this field. When I saw you lying there, I was worried that you might have a broken neck, which could cause breathing difficulties. If you stopped breathing, it would be difficult to perform artificial respiration. In your position, I quickly loosened my tie, unbuttoned the top of my shirt, and checked your eyes. The inverted position did not contribute to an increase in intracranial pressure, but unfortunately, I could not do anything about it without something to stabilize your neck. It wasn't safe to move you. I was relieved when you didn't regain consciousness and start moving. Fortunately, the ambulance arrived quickly. Do you still have the video that you recorded? I asked. She said that all the photos and videos were taken by her mother, but she has duplicates. She asked for my phone number to forward everything to me. While I was watching the video, Rachel was watching with me too. It was clear what was happening in the footage. Judy will be shocked when I tell her what her new hairstyle looked like, Rachel giggled. Cheryl said, I guess you're Judy's sister, you look like her. We paused for a moment, after which Cheryl hugged me and whispered in my ear, now that you have my number, feel free to call me whenever you need to talk to someone, she said quietly. And she added aloud, take care of yourself, Robert. Remember that everything should happen slowly and easily, no need to overexert yourself. With that, she turned around and headed back to her apartment. I couldn't tell if she was walking with any particular confidence or if it just seemed that way to me. John laughed as we drove away. Your mother-in-law would be thrilled with you if she wasn't married. She's a stylish lady who remains faithful to her husband. I looked at him, and he continued, and Sister Judy seems to have her eye on you too. Now she will readily climb into your bed at the first request. Just give her a chance. I shook my head in disbelief. And this neighbor, the nurse, is also interested in you. Did you think I wasn't paying attention? Yes, the situation is confusing, but you have a choice, little brother, he laughed as we walked towards the fishing camp. I hoped that the divorce process would go smoothly. I wanted it to end quickly. I instructed my lawyer to suggest to Judy that I would pay half of her rent and utilities if she decided to stay in the house alone. I offered to pay half of her grocery bill, but on the condition that she would buy food for herself and not takeout or from restaurants. I also offered to keep her on my data plan for 2 years so she would have time to get back on her feet. Judy's lawyer noted that this offer was more beneficial to her than what the law required in terms of my income. Despite the restrictions, Judy agreed to my terms and signed the agreement. With the impending divorce, Judy had more pressing matters to attend to. Accused of complicity in the attempt on Mark's life, she was released on her own recognizance. Although she had been questioned before, she had not been charged so far. Mark, on the contrary, was less fortunate. Having set bail on charges of attempted murder, he had difficulty gaining the required percentage. Julie took 70% of their cash and blocked their investment accounts, depriving him of access to funds. Without the $10,000 needed to pay for the services of a guarantor, Mark found himself in a difficult situation. The lawyer tried to get a loan for him against a receipt, but because of the assets associated with the divorce, it was not easy to get bail. I chuckled at the thought of him sitting in a prison cell. Mark had always considered himself an influential person, but now he had to face difficulties. Julie, as vicious as I am, received information about a supposed hidden account in her son's name in the Caribbean. She vowed to investigate, and I was shocked to learn that the secret account really existed. When she needed money, she sent her son to get it. Despite the fact that her son's name was not on the account, he was able to transfer the money because the account was issued in his name. I can only imagine the look on Mark's face when he realized his stash was gone. Since the account was in his son's name, the money was not considered part of their common property. Things could get even worse for Mark. Soon he would have problems with the tax service due to non-compliance with the proper procedure for donating money. As a result, no matter who pays the tax, in the end, Mark will never see a cent of that money again. I couldn't help but find this situation funny. Julie later informed me that her son had divided the money equally between his 2 siblings, using it as a contribution to their college funds. The Danvers boys were honest with each other, which was a rare trait. Justice moved slowly. My divorce from Judy was finalized a few months before her criminal trial, which was related to Mark. Judy was accused of helping Mark hide her involvement in my attack. Julie made sure that his funds were limited, Although he still had his 30% share in their joint property, it was not significant. His real estate agents were on the verge of abandoning him because of his tarnished reputation. Julie convinced Mark to sell and sign the franchise, speeding up the process. In exchange, he gave up the right to open another brokerage agency within a 50-mile radius for 5 years. I found this agreement beneficial because he needed funds for protection. While we were waiting for the criminal trial, I jokingly offered Julie a romantic meeting, to which she initially responded by calling me a sick person. After a few moments, she grinned and remarked, "You really want to get back at them, don't you?" We laughed at the idea of creating a fake video, but she noted that if she had to do something, she would give it her all. In the end, we decided to abandon this. A week before he could be released on bail, she went to see him. I accompanied her. We were talking through a plexiglass barrier when he asked why I was there. Julie replied, "Because I deserve it." She winked at Mark and grinned. I playfully covered my mouth with my fingers and clicked my tongue. I quietly inserted my index finger into the circle formed by the other finger and thumb. Mark's face turned red, and he stared at me. After a short pause, he suddenly flew into a rage. I was surprised by his reaction, as I expected him to just get angry. Later I found out that there are strict rules in the detention center, including one of them to control your temper. In a fit of anger, Mark grabbed a chair and slammed it against the plexiglass window several times. He was quickly subdued, and I heard that as a result of his outburst, he was placed in the punishment cell for several weeks. His bail was delayed and almost completely rejected because he was now seen as a threat to both Julie and me. It was clear that he needed to learn to control his words. During the trial, he spent more time looking at me than listening to the testimony. It was a mistake for him to appear in court, especially after I accused him of wanting to harm me and repeatedly called me humiliating names. When asked about the death threat, he initially claimed that he did not remember saying it, but then said that he would definitely do it. He continued to rant, calling me a liar and a coward. I deliberately provoked him by hinting at insults regarding the identity of my father and the appearance of my mother. I subtly imitated offensive gestures, although I did it discreetly to avoid detection. The man's calm demeanor quickly turned to rage. His lawyer's expression was pained. The result of the examination confirmed that he really attacked me and then carried me 15 feet to the top of the stairs, where he pushed me down. Now he was threatening to kill me if it helped his cause. Mark's lawyer was competent and tried to prove to the jury that Mark's actions were understandable given the circumstances. He committed the crime only because he had an affair with a married woman and was simply defending himself from a man with a gun. As a result, Mark lost his career, marriage, and freedom. Being physically abused while in prison due to post-traumatic stress disorder, his current mental state must be taken into account when evaluating his actions. The lawyer managed to raise enough doubts as a result of which Mark received a 10-year sentence instead of a potential 5-year one. Despite his outburst in court, Judy was asked to testify again, and she explained that she had never heard Mark threaten violence. But during the cross-examination conducted by the district attorney, she said that Mark had mentioned the possibility of hiring someone to harm me. Judy was visibly agitated by Mark's outburst during the trial. Earlier, she said that it was Mark who made up the story that he just came to visit her. I overreacted and hurriedly ran away when Mark stood up to confront me. She admitted that the fall was not accidental but Mark's deliberate action. During the trial, she repeated her testimony, saying that she was scared and believed that I was dead, so she went along with Mark's lies. She was sentenced to a year in the parish prison, while the district attorney recommended a suspended sentence. The judge disagreed and insisted that she serve at least 3 months given her initial false statement to the police. After her release, Judy came to visit me to apologize for deceiving me. This was our first face-to-face conversation since our conversation at the fish camp. I also appreciate that you did not share the video of our conversation, although you gave the audio recording to your mother. I was embarrassed, but I wanted to prove my loyalty to you. Mom really didn't give me any peace about it. She was really pushing me for cheating on you and ruining our marriage. Just realizing my actions wasn't enough. But then she saw the video that Cheryl's mom recorded. She warned me that if you weren't such a gentleman, you could expose me in front of everyone, shaming the whole family. As expected, she asked if there was any chance of reconciliation. I offered to consult or conclude a prenuptial agreement, but now it must be concluded after. Unfortunately, the prenup didn't stop Mark. I admitted that I had made a stupid mistake. I regret that I didn't talk to you sooner. Can we stay friends? It's important, especially if you're going to be dating my sister. Rachel mentioned that she has feelings for you. I've already told her that I'm not interested. Judy said goodbye, hoping for forgiveness in the future. Despite my sympathy for Rachel and her family, I understood that a relationship between us was impossible. It would only create tension in the family, and although I was hurt by her actions, I did not want to harm her family. I can't help but wonder how Mark is coping in prison. The thought made me chuckle. I suspect he may have been involved in several skirmishes. Now I'm trying to gather information about his well-being. Julie mentioned that she plans to visit her sons, both of whom are under 18, so she has to accompany them. She intends to ask him about his interactions with other prisoners discreetly, away from the boys' ears. A few months later, I received information about Mark's situation. He was transferred to another unit after a period of isolation. Although I did not know the details, it seems that his behavior was not perceived in the best way. He was found unconscious in the corner of the shower. It was obvious that he had been subjected to numerous blows. Apparently, in prison, they don't like those who sleep with other people's wives. As a sign of support, I sent him a greeting card with a smiley face. Rachel, Judy's sister, was constantly trying to persuade me to go on a date with her. Despite her repeated calls, I never succumbed to her requests. She insisted that her parents didn't mind us dating and that Judy supported the idea, but I knew it would only lead to trouble. I decided to stop all communication with Rachel, although from time to time I saw either her or Judy in the city. Judy eventually moved to Shreveport and got a job as a sales representative for a small manufacturing company. Her name was disgraced, as I found out later. Julie, Mark's wife, wanted revenge on Judy and released videos and photos featuring Judy and Mark in intimate moments. Cheryl and I started dating, and eventually, she moved in with me. A year later, we tied the knot and decided to start a family right away. Communication is a key moment in our relationship, and we both value loyalty. I know I'm going to have to be careful when Mark gets out of jail. I partly hope that he will be transferred. I admit I can be a little harsh, but only towards those who try to harm me.